Welcome, everyone, to the Authors Collective. I'm David Haisno, and today I'm joined by Megan A. Shakura, Gail Garbarino-Cullen, and Greg Schwem. Marlene Byrne is not able to be with us today, but she sends her blessing, so it's going to be the Fab Four today. And today, Greg has been kind enough to allow us to grill him a little bit about his background and what inspires him to write and all kinds of other good stuff. By way of introduction, I'd like to introduce Greg. He's a Chicago comedian and corporate speaker. He's written three books. The latest is Turning Gut Punches into Punchlines, A Comedian's Journey Through Cancer, Divorce, and Other Hilarious Stuff. I personally think that is a fantastic title and an even better subtitle. So without further ado, we're just going to start the conversation. Who's got something for
Absolutely.
Greg?
Well, I don't mind starting if that's okay. I think that humor is an amazing resource, an amazing tool in writing in a lot of ways, whether you're writing, a memoir as I did, to find those humorous touches to include, I think really grabs the reader and makes them that much more invested in your book. But
Mhm.
I find that it's not very easy to write humor. And I just wondered from your perspective, Greg, you write humor, you perform humor, you do your life is centered around humorous anecdotes or writings. And I wonder how you find your way to those moments. Do you just come up with them? Do you have any sort of almost focus group to bounce them off? Is this really funny? I wonder sometimes when I'm writing, is this even funny? I think it's
Right.
funny, but so what's your technique?
Yeah, I mean, as a comedian, when you think something's funny, you write it down. Now, but as a comedian, you have the ability to go on stage and find out if other people think it's funny. When you're writing humor, you really don't have that unless you're going to go do live book events and so forth. And I have done those, and then you see that. But you're basically just, I think when you're writing humor, you're just kind of amusing yourself. And that can be good and bad. I tend to not laugh. I don't laugh at myself. I don't laugh at my own stuff. I write it down in hopes somebody else will think it's funny. But I think that is one of the challenges of humor writing is like you said, Gail, is this funny? And you don't know that until the book is finished and it's out there and people respond to you and say this moved me or I could not stop laughing on the plane. But up until then, you don't know.
Greg, would you prefer to show up first on the page or first in person, where you're getting that immediate reaction?
Oh, I think in person. A lot of what I have written in my books, certainly probably the latest one, I think has been tested a little bit, either on stage or maybe with friends and so forth. I just want to see if they get a reaction. Sometimes it does work in reverse. Sometimes I will write things down and then say that might make a good bit at a comedy club or at a corporate event or so forth. But I think most things that you find in the book, I've at least thrown out the idea to somebody. They don't know that I'm doing that, of course. The worst thing you can do as a comedian is say to somebody, "Hey, I just wrote this joke. Let me try it on you." And let me know if you think it's funny because right now you've just jaded them a little bit. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to let people. My ex-wife used to know that I was trying material out on her. That's not why she became my ex-wife, but anyway, she would always just say to me, she goes, "You're trying material out on me." It's like, you know me too well. But yeah, for me, I think it's more take it to the stage, and then if they like that, then you can expand upon that in writing, because a lot of times when you write, you get that chance to flesh it out a little bit more that you can't do on stage just because it's too long and maybe people don't have the attention span to listen to it.
Greg, you started out, I presume you started out on stage and then became an author
Right.
after. How did you make that leap and how was did having that background on stage and being a humorist and a comedian make it easier or more difficult to jump from one medium to another?
Well, I think it made it easier for me. And plus, I have a background in journalism. I had a background in print journalism too, but I'd never, I was a newspaper reporter many moons ago, but I never thought I would write a book. But it kind of goes back to what I said in my last answer. There's a lot of things that I talk about on stage that I just think there's more to it here, but I don't have the time to do it on stage. And that's why I thought it would be fun to write a book. I mean, my first book that I wrote was called Text Me If You're Breathing, Observations, Frustrations, and Life Lessons from a Low Tech Dad. And I wrote that. I'd been doing a lot of material on stage about my kids and technology and the technologies that they were being introduced to and how fast they were being introduced and trying to keep up with that as a parent. And that was the kind of stuff I'm like, wow, there's a whole chapter in this. There's a whole chapter in buying your kid their first cell phone. There's a whole chapter in other types of technology. I mean, I wrote a whole chapter on swing sets. I'm purchasing a swing set because swing sets have gone high tech now. It's not just 6 poles that your dad, and his buddies drank a case of beer and then screwed in the ground and said, "It's ready." It's not totally sturdy, but it's ready anyway. That doesn't exist today. So that's what led me to write the first book and subsequent books as well.
Another sort of follow-up-ish
Yeah.
question for those of us that don't have the ability or the willingness or the opportunity to go on stage and try out our material. Do you have any thoughts? Because I have to believe, given your line of work, that humor is a very valuable tool to you, obviously, but that you would recommend that as a tool for other people who are trying to write something. Do you have any thoughts as far as how they can dabble in that and try out something or ways that they can try to incorporate humor in a piece that may not normally be funny necessarily?
Right. Well, maybe not everybody has the ability to get up on stage, but everybody has the ability to bounce their ideas off of somebody, whether it's your spouse or a friend or people in book club or anything like that. So I think you always get that. I get more often than I probably care to listen to you should come down to my crazy office because we're just so you can write a whole book on what goes on in my office and so forth because we're just nuts. But I think there's a little truth to that. But I think if you want to write funny, just start writing it. Just start writing it in your own voice and then read it out loud. Read it out loud and think to yourself, okay, if I was to talk about this in front of a room full of strangers, how would they, is it relevant enough? Is it tight enough? So you're basically sort of doing your own stand-up comedy act in a way, even if you've never been on stage. I think the spoken word is so much more powerful in humor than the written word. So if you're going to write funny, you have to speak it too. Because sometimes when you speak it, you realize, okay, that makes no sense at all, or there's no joke in there, there's no punchline. But eventually, everybody has a sense of humor. Everybody has an element of sarcasm in them, and everybody has that ability to make other people laugh, even if you don't think you do. If you've made somebody laugh, then you have that ability, right? So I feel like everybody can write funny for that very reason. But you have to own it. You have to own the material and be willing to play it back in your head and out loud and say, okay, I think I've got something here.
This isn't necessarily a session where we're giving tips and tricks, but I think when you talked about reading out loud, I think whether you're reading your own writing or editing your own writing or someone else's, I think the power of actually reading it back to yourself out loud allows you to be a better writer, a better editor, and also a better audience. I read Turning Gut Punches into Punchlines, and one of the ways I gauge truly funny people is that they also have the ability to be vulnerable and serious.
Yeah.
People who are always on to me aren't as funny as people who know and have this self-awareness. And you have that self-awareness, Greg. And I guess in a book like Turning Gut Punches into Punchlines, it's a funny book. It's a pretty funny narrative, but there's some very serious and vulnerable parts of that. Talk about how that makes the story better.
Out there, you can go to any bookstore and you can go to the humor section and you can see a lot of books that have been written by comedians. And I would say at least 2/3 of them are basically, they've just regurgitated their stand-up act. into pages. And to me, if you want to if you want to read that, why don't you just go see them live or download their Netflix special? My goal in writing this book, I think, was to show people that even comedians have our issues, and we can be vulnerable. Everybody looks at comedians as we're put on earth to make other people laugh. We just live in this world where we're just like, hey, everybody, it's great. That's what I'm going to do. Now, we all know of comedians that do have a lot of serious issues, who've had serious issues, many of which have ended in tragedy. I think what has really struck me about this book that maybe my other ones didn't is that people have come up to me afterwards and said, you have looked at things I'm going through in a different way, and it's made me smile, and it's made me realize that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that you can laugh at very unfunny subjects. And I've put myself out there in this one more than in any other book, and it's not all, like you said, it's not it's not necessarily, it is a humor book, because I look at things humorously, but I want people to also read it and go, wow, this guy's been through some stuff. The storyline was that I was going through a late in life divorce, a gray divorce, in 2023, 24. And while I was doing that, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. So that's two things, right? Two real hilarious topics. And at the same time that I was doing that, I was still on the road doing stand-up comedy and trying to entertain other people, which is really that's a hard mix. And the more that when I was getting off stage, of course, you're dealing with doctors, you're dealing with lawyers. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, okay, when there is going to be some humor in there, because it's the only thing that's getting me through this. The only thing that's getting me through this is to talk to friends, to talk to family members, and jokes would just come out. It's just part of me. But I thought, okay, those are real. I'm not just doing that as some to make people think I'm okay. I wasn't okay, but humor helps you get through tough situations. And I thought, all right, so now I've got to make myself feel good, and I've got to practice what I preach in a way. So that's really what the book came down to. So there's chapters in there about all the things that I went through. There's chapters about taking on second jobs because I wasn't sure how my income was going to play out after the divorce was final, and I might as well explore gig work. There's chapters in there about going to therapy, which I never had to do before. There's a chapter in there about the cancer itself, the operation, and what I went through for that, and all of that. When I sat down to write, I thought, okay, what's funny about this? So why not share that with the audience? So, and there's also a chapter in there about about gray divorce and how it is on the rise. That's something that a lot of people our age are going through right now and wondering if they made the right decision or so forth, or how they're going to live the rest of their life. And that's something that I think I did a lot of research, as we all do when we decide to write a book. The first thing we do is, who are our competitors? Has anybody written a book like this? And yeah, there's lots of stories about cancer survivors. There's lots of stories about people who've been divorced and so forth. But are there a lot of stories about a comedian going through that? No.
Well, and I one of the things I really appreciate about it is that we experience and we read about and we become part of your pain because you allow us to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another thing. I think being in the comedy world, you can probably attest to. There's a lot of people that hide behind their comedy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you didn't,
No.
Which I think is not only admirable, but I think it gives your writing so much more credibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want to do that. And I know a lot of comedians who do hide behind comedy, and they're not. I guess I'd say they're not happy people. Okay, but I don't want to be one of those people.
I wanted to ask you, in thinking about comics that I like and humorists that I read, they run such a gamut from the very clean to the no holds barred,
Yeah.
to the hold many things close to the vest, to laying it all bare. It's such a broad spectrum. So I wondered, for you, how do you decide where your line is and what you're willing to share?
That's a very good question. And there are things that I have not shared and that I choose to remain private. There are, I mean, divorce is a very personal thing and it involves a lot of players. And there are some players that I've chosen not to include in that. I believe as a comedian, not every subject should be a yuck a minute. There's no reason that we shouldn't be able to keep things private if we want. At the same time, I feel the best form of humor to me, I've always worked clean. I've always been very self-deprecating too. I think that people love to laugh at others. I definitely find that to be the case in corporate shows that I do, because most of my shows I do are for big business groups, which are very difficult audiences can be. I mean, I've chosen that, but they don't necessarily like to laugh at themselves, meaning when I go in there and say, what exactly is it that you do? I mean, I don't get it. But if you approach it with what you do, I don't understand it because I'm sort of the dumb guy here. So explain it to me, but I'm going to first explain it to you in a comedic way. They love that because that's an outsider coming in and looking at their business and and they're like, oh yeah, okay, I get it now. Do we really sound like that? That's kind of funny. So that's the kind of stories that I wanted to bring. Every story in the book, every chapter is always about kind of me walking into a very strange place that I've never experienced before. Whether it's walking into an Amazon warehouse and saying, okay, I'm going to start a job here today, or walking into an oncology unit, or walking into therapy, or filling out an online dating profile and having my first online date when I haven't dated anybody in 29 years. Every chapter opens with one of those scenes and like, okay, what's going to happen now? And that's kind of the way I write. And I just want the reader to follow along and enjoy it. Enjoy my pain, my mistakes, my cluelessness, because I think that is what makes people laugh.
You mentioned that corporate audiences are difficult. If
Yes.
you could stand in front of an audience and it was your perfect audience, who would it be?
Oh my gosh, that is a great question. I think it would be, I mean, obviously you say you're like you want to relate to people like you want people, but I think for me, the ideal audience is probably a mix of Gen Zs and baby boomers. Okay? So you've got people 55 and older, and you've got another crowd which is maybe 22 to 35. That's my ideal audience because now that allows me to play off of everybody, and that allows me to poke fun at the way people do things and then sort of pit them against one another in a very comedic way.
We are all authors, and I think we've all had this question. I always like to say nobody reads my book, but whenever I talk to people, they ask me when my next one's coming out.
Yeah.
So,
is that your question?
Yeah. So I'm gonna say to you, Greg, one author to another, what's next? Is it a book on a life in corporate comedy? I mean, do you have something else in the works, or
Yeah,
what's next?
I don't know what's next. I have thought about writing a book about what I've learned from younger generations, like what Gen Z has taught me. I live in a neighborhood in Chicago, which is very Gen Z oriented. Actually, I think most big cities are. I think most big cities are mostly people in that demographic, and then you get older and you move out to the suburbs or you move to an active retirement community or something like that. I don't want to do that. I don't see myself doing that. I feel so alive being surrounded with people who are at a different phase of their lives and do things differently and spend money differently and have different goals for the future and different hopes. And I'm fascinated with listening to them and talking to them. And there was a lot of that in this book, particularly towards the end, because I realize it's like, okay, I'm on sort of a personal journey to happiness, which is occurring at a very late stage in my life. What do these folks, what do these kids think makes them happy? And I want to hear about it. And are they satisfied with their lives and with their jobs and so forth? So there might be a book in there. There might be a book in that. Everybody intrigues me. Everybody who I meet, everybody who the Starbucks barista, the guy, working behind the fast food counter and or working three jobs, the woman who does, who conducts my spin class, everybody I find fascinating.
Curiosity is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
really powerful, especially if you're a storyteller or a creator or a writer. I think you
Right.
can't have anything better than curiosity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, this has been great. And Greg,
Yes.
thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. And for anybody who is watching, his latest book is, let's see here, Turning Gut Punches into Punchlines, can be found where, Greg?
At Amazon, of
At
course, on
Amazon.
Ingram, and
Okay.
maybe in your local bookstore. You never know. So
Yeah,
I would,
that and all of your books, right?
yes, and I would love to come for anybody who's watching and has a corporate event or something, or any kind of a private event that needs some humor. I would love to come and make you laugh, and then I'll sign some books afterwards for you too.
Fantastic. Well, Greg, thank you, and thanks everybody for joining us today. We are
Thanks.
the Authors Collective. Until next time.